Let's move on. I decoded Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I showed and proved how that story also comes from the Sumerian accounts. In the Sumerian accounts, it mentions Adamun, where you get your biblical Adam. In the Sumerian account, it mentions the Garden of Eden, which means abide of the righteous. And this is where your biblical Genesis, and this is where your biblical Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden story stem from, the Sumerian text, which predate Moses. Because popular belief is that Moses came with the first 5 books of the Bible, which is nonsense. Moses came with 613 laws, statutes, and commandments. No stories. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Is not Torah. That's not a law, that's not a statute, nor is that a commandment. It's a story. That came in later, during the time of Ezra, 450 BC, when the Tanakh was created. That's when them false stories of creation came into your text. Prior to that, you just had law, statutes, and commandments. And the writings of the prophets. This is how I know the Bible has been plagiarized, because I checked the history points and showed the discrepancies of the text itself. Showing you how this story comes from this ancient civilization. This particular story comes from this ancient civilization over here. Showing you where these stories came from in the Bible, where the Hebrews got it from. And how they had division and separation based off the added information that was introduced into the Torah. The Tanakh. All the Hebrews didn't agree with the Tanakh. There were discrepancies with that. And another thing, decoding the story of Noah and the flood. Many people believe that Noah was a person and had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But I exposed that. I decoded that. I showed and proved that Noah wasn't a person, but the name of the 17th ark cycle after the creation of mortals, called the Ark of Noah. And then it was when the earth entered the Ark of Noah that the flood took place. The purpose of the flood was the sinking of a continent called Pan in the Pacific Ocean. Some people call it Lemuria, some people call it Mu. I don't use those terms because those terms came about in the 1800s and it doesn't hold no significance to that continent. But Pan holds significance. And Japan is a relic or a piece of the continent of Pan. Some people call it Pangea, and they try to say that's when all the continents were connected. But that's not when all the continents were connected. That's when you had one big landmass in the Pacific Ocean called Pan. And when the earth entered the 17th ark after the creation of man, that's when the flood took place, or the sinking of Pan. It was the sinking of Pan that produced the flood, the rising of the sea levels, the sinking of this mighty continent. And Jehovah's sons and daughters who came when the earth entered in the Ark of Noah, 250 spacecrafts surrounded the continent and contracted tenfold, which was the power to crack the crust of a continent and sink it. Oahspe tells you these things, showing you the technology of the angels and how it would still coincide with temporality. And if you look at the ocean floor of the Pacific, you can see how it's not normal. If you compare the Pacific Ocean floor with the Atlantic Ocean floor, it's not the same. And there's underwater monuments off the coast of Okinawa, Japan, showing you temples, statues underwater. Relics of this once continent called Pan. So Noah wasn't a person, but the name of the 17th ark called the Ark of Noah. And the ark cycle is a 3,000-year period from one point to the next. So, if Noah didn't exist, what about Shem, Ham, and Japheth? They wouldn't have existed either as people, and they didn't. Oahspe decodes who Shem, Ham, and Japheth really were. And there was two more fleets to that, called Guatama and Yista, that's not mentioned in the Bible. Now, when the flood took place, Jehovah commanded his angels to inspire mortals that were chosen to be saved from the flood to build 138 ships. Now in the Bible it told you that Noah built one ship and housed all the animals, which is unrealistic. But in this event, he told the chosen to build 138 ships. And the number of people that was saved was 12,420 souls, compared to just your 3, 6, 7, 8 people according to your Bible story. But in Oahspe it tells you that 12,420 people were saved during the flood. And these 12,420 people were commanded to build 138 ships. And these 138 ships was divided into 5 fleets. 4 fleets of 34 ships, and then 2 fleets that were separate to themselves. And the names of these fleets of ships were called Shem, Ham, Japheth, Guatama, and Yista. So these wasn't the names of people, but the names of the fleets of ships congregated into groups. So after the flood, and when these ships docked at their ports, the fleets of Ham landed on the coast of South Africa. And then after the flood, these became your Hamites. And then that's when the now civilization started after the flood. And the flood was 25,000 years ago, or 8 arc cycles, from the 17th arc cycle to the 25th arc cycle, which is the present arc cycle we in now, being 8 arc cycles of a 3,000-year period, with slight variation in years. So it's 25,000 years since the flood. So the 34 ships of Ham became the Hamites, and the Nile Valley civilization started again. The fleets of Shem landed in India and migrated from India as far as Mesopotamia, and those became your Shemites. Japheth is the Chinese or the Asians. And then you got Guatama, which is not mentioned in your Bible. These became your Native Americans, and they ported and they docked after the flood in Central America. Starting the main kingdoms and the different civilizations you find in Central America coming north and south after the flood. And then you have Yista, which were the 2 ships that landed in Japan. And these were the 5 fleets of ships saved in the Ark of Noah during the sinking of Pan, which produced the flood. And these people were surviving on the continent of Pan at the time. Pan was equivalent to like how America was. The meeting of nations, a place of different nations, where all came together. So when Pan sunk 25,000 years ago, those 5 fleets of ships, with those 12,420 people on it, were the ones to repopulate the planet after the flood. So you have 12,420 people to regenerate the seed of mortals compared to your 8 souls in your Bible story. So Oahspe is giving you a more detailed account, a more clear account of the flood and the truth about Noah.